Hey folks, this is Pastor Joe, and this is the first of our new study series on the City of God that we're doing for the youth, but it's also for anybody who would really like to jump in and see it. These will be short clips, I hope they'll be short, clips about this topic. That's a theme running throughout the whole Bible, and we'll just cover little bits of it here and there, and we ask that you participate by asking questions in the comments section. So again, this study, it's designed to take us through the biblical concept of the city of God. And this subject spans both testaments, beginning with the Garden of Eden all the way in the beginning to the very fulfillment of the New Jerusalem at the end. And the ultimate end of this whole idea is to embrace wholeheartedly the psalmist's desire, which in Psalm 27:4 it says, "One thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." So why a city? Why not a garden as the appropriate metaphor that we're used to? Well, the Bible has many metaphors that we could take off, but to answer the question, cities are prominent as a theme in the Bible, and there is a deep connection to what God is communicating in his overall plan to a very specific city. And so cities inspire very different emotions in people. For some, they are a magnet, offering every opportunity and pleasure that a civilized person might desire. It's the center of everything that is happening. That's what a city is. For others, cities are places from which to escape. The peace, the tranquility of a rural life being far more attractive than the alternative. And so for some, cities can be the place where evil occurs and where indulgence occurs. Like them or loathe them, cities have been a major part or major feature of human life for millennia. And since they are everywhere, it is no surprise that cities figure prominently in the Bible. And their presence, however, is not just incidental. At the very heart of God's plan for our world stands, again, as I said, an extraordinary city. In the book of Revelation, we find exiled to the island of Patmos is John in the first century, and he has experienced a vision.
I'm having a vision!
Or maybe even a series of visions. And he later records these in the book that we call the Revelation. And as a message of encouragement to the earliest followers of Jesus Christ, these are telling of this ultimate triumph of God. Well, John's final vision involves a city, but it's no ordinary metropolis. First of all, it's huge. A city that would consume over half the landmass of the United States. The proportions are ridiculous. And it's also decked out with every type of luxury you can think of, jewels and gold and pearls. It is, in a word, heavenly. Adding an altogether different aspect to this unique city, John observes that its citizens enjoy an environment that's been transformed by the radiance of God. God himself is there in this city. It's a paradise. There's peace and security and wholeness and all the nutrients of human flourishing. Evil is banished entirely. And as humanity shares this wonderful place with the divine creator, this city is a city like no other. So the picture that's being painted here is of an otherworldly place, like other visions that John has in the Revelation, with all of this symbolic imagery. And it ultimately is showing this final goal of God's, where a new Garden of Eden, only now a city and a temple, is the place where God dwells and that we dwell with him. It's really a fitting climax to the entire biblical story, where it's not just that we're returning back to where we started, but we're returning to something that is what we started with, but even better, newer, bigger, grander, more complete and full. God's ultimate intention. And that's what we have as this conclusion to the Bible and to John's vision. So This is where we start to take that final vision and link the beginning and the end of the Bible together. Or as our study puts it, that the New Jerusalem brings to completion what God intended when he first created the earth. The two acts of divine creation frame the Bible for us. And the links between them are more than just superficial. They're very strong. The origins of New Jerusalem are to be found in the early chapters of Genesis. And as we shall discover, the Garden of Eden is located at the center of a green field site where God intends to construct a holy city upon the earth. So let's begin by tying these two important places together, the Garden of Eden and the New Jerusalem city. So number one, at first glance, they do seem quite different. Obviously, one's a garden, one's a city, one's rural, one's urban. But there are features that connect them. And the first of these is the tree of life. It's found at both the center of the Garden of Eden, and it's also found in this new city of Jerusalem. Only here in Jerusalem, the access to the tree is now available. It's given for the healing of the nations. So one is the tree of life. It is present in both places. And then number two, it is only in this place that humanity actually speaks face to face with God, that has this close personal fellowship that even the prophets and Moses himself don't have with God. So from these initial two link points, we can start to infer some ideas. First, that what God was doing in the garden and what God will ultimately do in the New Jerusalem are linked together. That God always intended to dwell amongst humanity. We see that happening in the garden, but we see it ultimately completed in the New Jerusalem, in the city where God's presence is there and where everyone else is dwelling. So as God commands humanity in those first couple of chapters in Genesis to fill the earth and subdue the earth, we see the conclusion of that idea maybe more completely, more fully in this new city of Jerusalem, to make the world a paradise, just as the garden was a paradise, but that paradise spread not just from the garden, but throughout the whole world. Now, of course, unfortunately, there's a massive interruption to this program, and we know of it as sin. There's also other hints throughout the Bible and throughout the Old Testament that link the Garden of Eden not just to this new city of Jerusalem, but to every time that God seeks to have community, to have fellowship with his people. And so in the Garden of Eden, you have the entrance of the garden being facing the east, and it's guarded by cherubim. And this same imagery is also seen in the temple and in the tabernacle in which the Israelites worship. When God commands the man to work in the garden and to keep the garden, he uses these verbs in the Hebrew, abad and samar. And elsewhere in the law, in the Old Testament, these same verbs are used in combination to describe the duties of the Levites as they take care of the sanctuary, as they take care of the tabernacle. There's other clues. The menorah lampstand is in the shape of a tree, the tree of life maybe, or the cherubim like guards on the lid of the Ark of the Covenant there, just like in the entrance to the Garden of Eden. There's even the river that flows out of Eden, and the same kind of river is mentioned in Ezekiel flowing out of this new future Jerusalem temple. So what's the point of these links between Eden and the new city of Jerusalem, the worship of the Israelites? Well, most likely, the answer is that Eden recalls a time when humanity enjoyed an especially close relationship with God in this perfect environment. And the sanctuaries later are meant to replicate something of this experience, to draw the people back to thinking of that first time when there was harmony between them and God. And that ultimately that's what God's trying to bring us to, but that there is this separation because of sin. A holy God cannot come to a sinful people and vice versa. So the sanctuary is a place where God can live in close proximity to the people. And it could be seen also as a model, maybe a tiny model of that future reality where the whole earth is filled with God's people and God's presence. So let's make a final application point here. All of this imagery and connections come down to a basic idea. God longs to dwell with his creation, and specifically with humanity, not to be separate from him. And if sin is the main dividing line that we as humanity create separation, we do it all the time. And as we move away from the city of God, each time that we sin, we move out into that world of sin and death. Each time we defy God and his ways, just as Adam and Eve did, we are walking out of Eden. We're exiles from home. So part of this study is looking at how we move from where we find ourselves presently, exiles, towards that city of God. And we will catch you next week as we kind of jump in and explore this introductory thought a little bit more. So what I would like you to do is, if you can think of any questions related to this, put those down in the comments below or at the YouTube page where this video will also be posted, and we will answer them throughout the week. All right. I hope you enjoyed this initial introduction. We'll get more into the details later, and we will see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.